July 2nd, 1852. Morning. Today marks our ascent through the inaugural mountain pass. We're in line for our turn to climb, granting me a few spare moments to jot down my thoughts. The lead group has already summited, and the second is currently on its way. Our party, comprising Stephen, Michael, the elderly lady in the wheelchair, and a few others close by, find itself in the third batch. Martine oversees the whole endeavor, and even from our spot further down the trail, his frustrated curses carry clearly through the air. July 2nd, 1852, night. We've made our passage through the mountain gap and out onto the plains yonder, after the day of toil that's left us all spent. But there ain't no spirits for rejoicing, and it isn't just on account of our weariness. A dire misfortune befell us this day. A grievous mishap took the old lady in the rocking chair from us. After surviving more than 1,000 miles of battling the cruel stretches of the American plains, where many a younger and sturdier folk have been claimed by sickness, misadventure, and even blasts, her passing casts a long shadow over our day. I'll try to make this short and to the point. The whole affair kicked off when she wouldn't budge from her rocking chair, despite having 4 oxen tethered to her wagon. Initially, we opted to steer clear of any fuss, letting her remain perched in her seat. But she was jostling and skidding something fierce on account of the rocky terrain and the steep slope we were facing. At first, the oxen were able to carry her up without much of a struggle. But then we hit a patch so steep that the oxen had to be unhitched. We tied ropes around the wagon, setting up a pulley system to haul the darn heavy thing up the incline. Every man pitched in alongside the oxen. That's how tough the pull was. She was set on staying put in her chair, even as we tackled this perilous task. But we couldn't just stand by this time. We had to confront her. The risk was too high, what with the slope nearing a sharp 45-degree angle, and her wagon being heftier than normal. We tried to persuade her to step down and hoof it. Even offered to tote her cherished chair up the incline by hand ourselves. My mind wandered to that strange contraption of hers I'd glimpsed some weeks back, wondering if it added much weight to the load. Yet I held my tongue, unsure of its purpose, and half thinking it might have been a figment of my imagination. Our discourse unfolded thusly. At first, we appealed to her sense, and she countered with her own. Then, as we persisted, she met our arguments with stubborn resistance and shouts. When we pressed on, she took to critiquing our very character, prompting me to wonder if Joseph's influence had reached her too. In the end, we stood our ground, declaring we'd not haul her up unless she consented to lessening her load. Otherwise, she'd be left behind. It was an insurmountable task for 4 oxen and 10 men. After much back and forth, Martine's patience wore thin, and he made to physically remove her from the wagon himself. It was at that juncture she acquiesced. It took her a moment to ready herself, but then she descended from her wagon for the first time in 3 months, as far as I could see. Her eyes flickered about, anxious, as she found herself on terra firma, leaving me to ponder if her legs might collapse from lack of use and withering. I braced myself for the likelihood that we might have to bear her up the mountain as well. Even with the hefty solid wood rocking chair and the woman herself out of it, her wagon remained dreadfully heavy. Given she was but skin and bones, likely tipping the scale at less than 70 pounds, it was puzzling. The men all swore up a storm, yet I held back from bringing up the odd machinery to my mates, out of a sense for her respect for her privacy. Now that we could finally get the wagon to move, we started the slow, steadfast haul up the steep pass. Down below, the woman waited, a picture of sorrow and anxiety, with Morgan by her side offering comfort as best she could. I'll share what came next, though part of me wishes I could deny it ever happened. Right as we hauled the wagon over a particularly steep part of the pass, our arms already aching from the day's exertion, a sudden raucous cawing of ravens burst from a nearby bush, sounding for all the world like laughter from the depths of hell itself. Martine, scared out of his wits, let out a scream, sharp enough to split the sky, hollering, "Run! Run!" Without a second's thought, we all let go of the ropes and scrambled for cover, convinced we were under attack by Indians, or perhaps a grizzly bear had found us. It spooked the oxen something fierce too, and 3 of them broke their yokes and bolted. Meanwhile, that wagon started moaning its way backwards down the trail, the lone oxen getting hauled back with it. In no time at all, it was tearing down that slope faster than a spooked horse that's caught wind of a skunk. The elderly lady, stationed at the bottom, let out a harrowing scream, but she couldn't shuffle off to the side quick enough. Morgan was beside herself, trying to lend a hand, but to no avail. She just couldn't manage it. The sound was crushing. Her body hitting the wagon with a heavy thud. We dashed down as quick as lightning. The wagon wheel had come to rest atop her lifeless form. The poor soul was nigh on unconscious, her body a mess of broken bones and slashes. She was barely drawing breath by the time we got to her. Yet she managed a few faint whispers. We could hardly catch a word of what she murmured in those final moments. We all reckoned she'd been spouting her usual babble, even as death approached. There was a sort of poetry in it, truth be told. But then, leaning closer, with her last breath, she uttered, clear as a bell, "Plug me in, motherfucker!" We exchanged glances, bewildered. Such a harsh farewell for one's final breath. Managed to get a look inside her wagon and got a closer view of that contraption I'd noticed before. Emblazoned on its side was a peculiar phrase. Avatar Immortality Device. And by where that wire led, plug this wire into head port. But there wasn't much time to ponder over it. We grabbed what seemed important from her wagon, her cookware, blankets, and attire, and left the rest by the trailside. Took her body with us for proper burying. I'll need to delve deeper into this come tomorrow. My eyes are heavy tonight. Too wary to write more.